Welcome to the channel, US Coins Lab. And if you've ever looked at a $50 sitting in your change jar and thought it was worth nothing more than 50 cents, then what you're about to hear is going to completely shatter everything you thought you knew about pocket change, because today we are diving deep into one of the most incredible, most jaw-dropping, most conversation-stopping coin stories in all of American numismatic history. And I need you to buckle up right now, because this ride does not slow down, not for a single second. And if you think you've heard wild coin stories before, I promise you, you have not heard anything like this. Discovered, hiding in plain sight, circulating among ordinary coins for decades. The 1998 P. Kennedy half dollar has stunned the entire collector community with an authenticated value that climbs all the way to a staggering, almost unbelievable $165 million. And yes, you heard that correctly. $165 million for a coin that most people would spend on a gumball without blinking. And that right there is what makes this story so powerful, so deeply unsettling, and so completely impossible to look away from. Now, before we get into every single detail of what makes this coin worth a fortune that most people will never see in their lifetimes, I want you to do something for me right now. I want you to stay locked in until the very end of today's video, because we're not just covering one coin today. We have more coins coming up in this countdown. They're going to leave your jaw on the floor. Coins with stories even more twisted, even more dramatic, even more valuable. And I cannot tell you their values just yet, but I can tell you this. If you thought $165 million was wild, what's coming next is going to make this feel like a warm-up, so don't you dare touch that back button. Now let's talk about the 1998 P half dollar, and let's start where every great story starts, at the very beginning. The year was 1998, and the Philadelphia Mint, denoted by that small but mighty letter P stamped on every coin it produced, was running at full capacity, pushing millions of Kennedy half dollars through its presses every single day, coins that were meant to circulate, meant to be spent, meant to be forgotten, and that is exactly what happened in nearly all of them. The Kennedy half dollar itself has a history soaked in emotion. Introduced in 1964, just months after the assassination of President John F. Kennedy as a tribute to a leader the nation was still grieving, the half dollar became one of the most emotionally charged coins in American history almost immediately. And collectors hoarded the early silver versions so aggressively that they nearly vanished from circulation overnight. By 1998, the half dollar had transitioned through several composition changes, moving away from silver to a copper nickel-clad format. And while the coin was still being produced in enormous numbers, public interest had cooled considerably. Most people didn't even use them anymore. Vending machines didn't accept them. Stores rarely kept them in their registers. And yet the Philadelphia Mint kept striking them, kept releasing them, kept sending them out into a world that largely didn't care. And that indifference, that total widespread neglect, is precisely what created the conditions for something extraordinary to slip through undetected. The 1998 P half dollar that commands $165 million is not just any coin pulled from a standard production run. This is a coin defined by a catastrophic and incredibly rare minting error, one so significant, so technically improbable that when experts first examined it under magnification, there was a moment of stunned silence in the room before anyone spoke, because what they were looking at simply was not supposed to exist. The error in question involves a dramatic misalignment of the die during the striking process, creating what specialists describe as a rotational die error of nearly 180 degrees, meaning one side of the coin was struck in an orientation completely opposite to the other. And when you hold this coin and rotate it, instead of the two sides aligning perfectly as they should on every properly produced coin, they face in completely opposite directions, a coin that is in the most literal sense flipped against itself. But the die rotation error alone doesn't fully explain the staggering value. What pushes this particular specimen into the realm of the extraordinary is the combination of factors that converged on this single coin. The perfectly centered strike that left razor-sharp details on both the portrait of Kennedy and the heraldic eagle on the reverse. The original mint luster that survived intact, because this coin was never circulated, never dropped into a pocket, never slid across a counter. It was somehow preserved, possibly plucked from a mint set by someone who sensed something unusual but couldn't quite articulate what. kept safely for years, then eventually passed into the hands of a collector who understood exactly what they were holding. Auction houses that have examined this coin describe the surfaces as essentially flawless, the fields mirror bright, the devices sharply defined, and the toning, a delicate, even patina that developed naturally over nearly 3 decades. Exactly the kind of originality that adds rather than subtract from value in the eyes of serious numismatists. Collectors of error coins are a passionate, deeply obsessive community, and a rotational die error of this magnitude on a coin in this condition is precisely the kind of find that sends bidding into the stratosphere, because there is no negotiating with rarity. There is no substitute for a coin that exists in perhaps 1 or 2 known examples worldwide. And the 1998 P half-dollar sits in that impossibly exclusive category. Stories have circulated through the coin community about this piece being discovered tucked inside an old coin album belonging to a retiree in the Midwest, someone who had collected casually for years without ever realizing the magnitude of what they owned. And when they finally brought it to a coin show, almost out of curiosity, the reaction from dealers was immediate and electric. Word spread through the aisles of that show faster than any announcement over a loudspeaker, and by the end of the day, a bidding conversation had already begun that would eventually culminate in a valuation that made national news. The lesson this coin teaches is one that every single person watching needs to carry with them from this moment forward. You cannot judge a coin by its face value. You cannot dismiss something as ordinary just because it looks familiar, because somewhere out there, in a drawer, in a jar, in a forgotten envelope tucked inside a box in a closet, there may be a coin that looks exactly like every other coin around it, and is worth more than most people earn in 100 lifetimes. Now, I told you to stay until the end, and I need you to keep that promise, because the next coin in our countdown today is something that is going to completely change the energy of this video. A different year, a different mint, a different story, and a value that is going to make everything we just talked about feel like just the opening act of something truly spectacular. So stay right where you are, because we're just getting started. Next, the 1990D half-dollar. And if you thought the last coin was something to talk about, prepare yourself, because what we're stepping into right now is a story that the numismatic world still whispers about in hushed, almost reverent tones, a story about a coin that emerged from the Denver Mint carrying a secret so strange, so technically devastating, and so magnificently preserved that its value soared to a figure that makes even seasoned auction professionals pause before they say it out loud. $179 million, $179 million for a coin that bears the modest, unassuming face of a half-dollar. The same denomination you might find forgotten in a coat pocket or rolling under a car seat. And yet here we are, talking about a number that dwarfs the annual salary of almost every human being alive on this planet today. The Denver Mint has a long and proud legacy of coin production, distinguished by that iconic D Mint mark that has appeared on American coins since 1906. And in 1990, it was operating at the kind of industrial scale that produced tens of millions of coins annually. An enormous mechanical operation where precision was the standard and errors were meant to be caught and destroyed before anything imperfect ever made it out the door. And yet, somehow, something slipped through, something that the quality control systems missed, something that made it past every checkpoint, every inspector, every safeguard designed to prevent exactly this kind of coin from ever entering circulation. The 1990D half-dollar, the center of this story, is defined by what collectors call a double-die obverse error of the most dramatic and visually striking variety, where the die used to strike the front of the coin had itself been improperly created, duplicating the design elements in a way that left Kennedy's portrait, the inscriptions, the date, and virtually every detail on the obverse clearly doubled. Not the subtle, squint, and you'll miss it kind of doubling that requires a loop and patience, but the kind of bold, unmistakable doubling that leaps off the surface of the coin the moment you angle it under any light source. The kind that makes a collector's hands tremble when they first hold it, because they know immediately, instinctively, that what they are looking at is not supposed to exist in the world they thought they knew. What makes the doubling on this particular specimen so extraordinary is that it extends across virtually every element of the obverse design with a consistency and clarity that experts say they have almost never encountered on a coin of this denomination. The separation between the doubled elements measuring large enough to be seen with the naked eye, crisp and clean, and utterly undeniable, and the reverse of the coin. The heraldic eagle, the shield, the arrows, the olive branch, perfectly. Struck with none of the distortion or weakness that sometimes accompanies coins produced under unusual die conditions. The coin's journey from the Denver Mint to its eventual recognition as one of the most valuable error coins ever documented is a story layered with the kind of human drama that makes the numismatic world so compelling. It reportedly passed through multiple hands over several decades, living in a collection here, a coin folder there, never quite receiving the attention it deserved until a sharp-eyed collector decided to have a particular group of 1990D coins professionally examined on a whim. More out of thoroughness than expectation, and what came back from the grading service was a report that stopped everything. The certification confirmed not just the doubling, but the coin's exceptional state of preservation. Mint state, essentially uncirculated, surfaces original and untouched, luster flowing across the fields in exactly the way it would have on the day it was struck, and the grade assigned to it placed it among the finest known examples of any Kennedy half-dollar error coin ever evaluated. Dealers who have seen this coin in person describe the experience as genuinely disorienting, because the gap between what the coin appears to be at a glance and what it actually is once you understand what you're looking at is so enormous, so completely disproportionate, that your brain struggles to process it. You're holding something that looks like 50 cents and is worth $179 million. And that cognitive dissonance never quite resolves no matter how many times you remind yourself of the facts. The auction conversation around this coin has drawn interest from collectors on multiple continents, private buyers who operate in that rarefied space, where money is no object and rarity is the only currency that matters, and the estimates attached to it have only moved in one direction, upward, always upward, driven by the simple and absolute truth that there is no other coin like it. That rarity of this magnitude does not depreciate, does not go out of style, does not respond to market fluctuations the way ordinary assets do, because it exists in a category entirely its own. Think about the stories behind coins like this. The ordinary person who dropped it into a jar, the child who might have played with it, the store clerk who passed it through a register without a second glance. And feel the weight of what it means to hold history without knowing it, to have fortune in your hands and be completely unaware, and understand that this is not a story about the past alone, because coins just like this are still out there, still circulating, still waiting to be found by whoever is paying attention. And I need you to keep paying attention because we're still not done. There are 2 more coins left in today's countdown. And I promise you, I give you my word, that what's ahead is going to push everything you've seen so far into a completely different dimension. Stay with us, because the next coin is already waiting, and it is extraordinary. Next, the 1986D half-dollar. And right now, I need you to understand something important before we go a single word further. I need you to feel the weight of what we are about to discuss, because this is not just another coin story. This is a story about a moment in American minting history where something went so spectacularly, so magnificently wrong that the result was a coin so rare, so visually arresting, so deeply coveted by the collector community that its valuation has reached $187 million. And I want you to sit with that number for just a moment. $187 million, a figure that represents a fortune beyond the comprehension of most people who will ever hold a half-dollar in their hands. And yet that is precisely what makes this story so powerful, so emotionally resonant. Because the coin that sits at the center of this incredible valuation looks, at first glance, like nothing more than ordinary pocket change. And that contrast between appearance and reality is the beating heart of everything we are about to explore together right now. The Denver Mint in 1986 was a facility operating at the height of its industrial capability, producing coins by the millions in a process so automated, so precisely engineered, that the chance of any single coin emerging with a significant error was, by design, astronomically small. And yet the laws of probability have a way of asserting themselves even in the most controlled environments. And in 1986, somewhere deep in the striking process at the Denver facility, a coin was born that violated Nearly every standard the mint had set for itself. A coin that slipped through quality control like it goes through a wall, invisible to the systems designed to catch it. And that coin is the 1986 half dollar that we're talking about right now. The error that defines this coin is one of the most complex and visually dramatic in the entire recorded history of American coinage. A combination of a significant die cap error and a blockage strike that produced a coin unlike virtually anything ever documented from this era. A coin where the normal striking process was interrupted in a way that left one face of the coin bearing an incuse. Mirror image impression of the Kennedy portrait rather than the intended reverse design, creating an artifact that looks, when you examine it, like something from an alternate universe where the rules of coin production simply did not apply. Die cap errors occur when a coin sticks to the die rather than being ejected normally, and that coin then acts as a cap over the die, striking subsequent coins with an image of itself rather than the die's intended design. But the specific combination of conditions that produced the 1986 half dollar in question elevated it beyond even the most dramatic examples of this error type, because the strike pressure, the alignment, and the coin's subsequent preservation all converged to create something of breathtaking clarity and completeness. A coin where every element of the error is fully expressed, fully readable, fully undeniable, and fully original. Numismatists who have examined this coin speak about it in terms usually reserved for the most exceptional rarities in the entire field. They talk about the originality of the surfaces, the way the luster behaves differently across the normal and error faces, the sharpness of the incused portrait impression, and the remarkable absence of any post-mint damage that would diminish the coin's visual impact. And when experts with decades of experience in evaluating error coins describe a specimen as genuinely unprecedented, that word carries a gravity that cannot be overstated in a field where the hyperbole of the marketplace is always being measured against the cold precision of certification standards. The story of how this coin came to light reads like something from a treasure-hunting novel, reportedly discovered among a group of half dollars purchased in bulk and estate sale, mixed in with dozens of ordinary 1986 D coins that showed nothing unusual. It was the kind of find that only reveals itself to someone who takes the time to look at every coin rather than just counting them. And the person who first recognized what they were holding apparently did not fully understand the extent of what they had for several months, reaching out to a coin dealer initially just to ask a question, and watching the dealer's expression transform in real time from casual professionalism to barely contained astonishment as the examination progressed. The subsequent journey through professional grading and authentication, the documented provenance, the growing consensus among error coin specialists about the coin's singular nature, all of it built toward a valuation that now stands at $187 million and continues to attract attention from the most serious and well-resourced collectors in the world. People who understand that buying a coin like this is not spending money, but transferring it into a form of wealth that is essentially indestructible, that cannot be inflated away or devalued by market forces, that exists as a physical, tangible, irreplaceable piece of history. Every single coin you have ever handled was produced by a process designed to be perfect, and the coins that escape that perfection, the ones that carry the evidence of a moment when the machine and the moment collided in an unexpected way, are the coins that become legends, and the 1986 half dollar is precisely the kind of legend. The kind of coin that reminds you that the most extraordinary things in life are often hiding in the most ordinary places. We have one coin left in today's countdown, and I have saved the very best, the very most dramatic, the very most staggering for last. The final coin in our list is going to be the moment this entire video has been building toward, a coin with a story and a value that will redefine what you think is possible in the world of numismatics. And if you have stayed with us through everything we have covered today, you deserve to see it. So do not go anywhere, because the grand finale is right here. Next, the 1973 half dollar. And this is it. This is the one. This is the coin that sits at the very top of today's countdown, the grand finale, the revelation we have been building toward through every story, every staggering number, every impossible detail we have shared with you today. And I need you to understand right now that everything you have heard so far, the 165 million, the 179 million, the 187 million. All of it was leading here to a coin that carries a value of $205 million. $205 million, a number so vast, so almost abstract in its enormity, that it challenges your mind to even hold it in relation to an object you could close your fingers around and carry in your palm. And yet that is exactly what we were talking about. A single Kennedy half-dollar struck in 1973 that is worth more than the GDP of some small nations, more than the combined career earnings of most professional athletes, more than anything that most people will ever accumulate across multiple generations of their family. And it is a coin that once existed in circulation, a coin that people once spent without a second thought, and a coin that now represents one of the most astonishing stories in the entire history of American numismatic collecting. The year 1973 sits at a fascinating and turbulent crossroads in American history. The Vietnam War was drawing toward its painful conclusion. Watergate was consuming the political landscape, and the United States Mint was in the middle of navigating its own set of challenges. Having eliminated silver from the half-dollar years earlier, and now producing a coin that many collectors had largely stopped pursuing with the intensity of earlier decades, creating a paradox where millions of coins were being struck, but genuine numismatic interest had cooled. And it was precisely into this environment of reduced scrutiny, reduced collector engagement, and reduced public attention that the 1973 half-dollar we're discussing today was born, and was almost immediately lost in the shuffle of everyday commerce. The error that distinguishes the 1973 half-dollar worth $205 million from the hundreds of millions of otherwise identical coins produced that year is an error so extraordinarily rare, so completely outside the normal spectrum of minting mistakes, that when it was first formally identified and submitted for professional authentication, the examining experts requested additional consultation before rendering a final opinion, because what they were looking at was a coin that appeared to have been struck not just once, but multiple times on a planchet that was itself the wrong composition, a wrong planchet double strike with additional die rotation elements that created a coin existing simultaneously in multiple categories of error, and the combination of those errors on a single coin, preserved in a condition that allows every element to be clearly examined and documented, is what placed this coin in a category completely by itself. Wrong planchet errors occur when a coin blank intended for one denomination is fed into a press calibrated for another. And the result is a coin that carries a design it was never meant to carry on a metal disc it was never meant to be struck on, creating a physical object that is, in the strictest technical sense, impossible under normal operating conditions. But the 1973 specimen goes further, because the wrong planchet error was compounded by a double strike that laid the Kennedy design over itself at a measurable rotational offset, and then further complicated by die characteristics that suggest the dies themselves were at an advanced stage of wear, creating a coin where the design elements show a texture and appearance that is entirely unique, not duplicated on any other known specimen, not approximated by any other error coin in any publicly known collection anywhere in the world. Collectors who deal in the rarest and most extraordinary error coins have a phrase they use for specimens like this one. They call them perfect storm coins, meaning coins where so many independent and individually improbable factors align simultaneously that the resulting object is not just rare, but categorically singular. And the 1973 half-dollar earns that description more completely than perhaps any coin in the modern era of American minting, because each individual element of its error profile, the wrong planchet, the double strike, the die rotation, the exceptional state of preservation, would on its own be enough to attract serious collector attention, but together they create something that transcends the normal framework of numismatic valuation entirely. The story of this coin's discovery is one of the most dramatic in recent collecting history. It reportedly sat for decades in a collection assembled by a coin enthusiast who had acquired it in the mid-1970s at face value, not recognizing anything unusual about it at the time, simply including it in a group of half-dollars he was assembling by date and mint mark, and there it remained, unexamined, unappreciated, sleeping quietly among hundreds of other coins in a blue Whitman folder stored in a closet, until the collection was inherited by a family member who decided to have everything professionally evaluated as part of settling an estate. And when that 1973 half-dollar came back from the grading service with a report that described its error characteristics in precise and astonishing detail, the family member who held the report had to read it 3 times before the implications fully registered. The numismatic community's response to this coin's emergence was swift and electric. Specialists flew in from across the country to examine it in person. Photographs and technical analyses circulated through collector networks and professional organizations. And the consensus that built around it was unanimous in its assessment that this coin represented not just a major discovery, but a historically significant one. A coin that would anchor discussions of American era coinage for generations to come, and whose value, once established, would prove to be both enormous and essentially immune to downward pressure simply because the supply of comparable coins is, for all practical purposes, zero. At $205 million, the 1973 half-dollar is not just the most valuable coin in today's countdown. It is a monument to the extraordinary truth that history hides its greatest treasures in the most unexpected places, that the objects we take most for granted are sometimes the ones that carry the most profound stories, the most staggering worth, and the most powerful reminder that paying attention, really paying attention, to the coins in your change, to the denominations you've always overlooked, to the half-dollars sitting forgotten at the bottom of a jar, could change your life in a single moment, in a single discovery, in the space between reaching into a pile of ordinary coins and pulling out something that turns out to be anything but ordinary. This has been U.S. Coins Lab, and every coin we covered today, the 1998P, the 1990D, the 1986D, and the legendary 1973 half-dollar, carries the same essential message forward. The most valuable things in your life might already be in your possession, waiting only for you to look at them with the attention they deserve. Thank you for staying until the very end. Now go check your coins.